Now, in Chapter 2, this is the elements of healing. We're going to deal with the things we learned about in the context of healing when we talked about universal structure, when we talked about shields and the Cathara grid, the 3 levels of the Cathara grid. We had the Cathara 12-tree grid, we had the crystal seals grid, and we had the dyadic grid. Now these we learned about a little bit in relation to the 15-dimensional time matrix and how these are the structures that the primal life force currents run through from source into the manifest worlds, into planets, galaxies, universes, and into our bodies. Now we're going to learn where those structures of internal anatomy fit within the human body. So in this particular chapter, we have a sequence of things we're going to learn that will take us to that point. First, we're going to learn about the Maharic shield and the imprint for health. And I've already talked quite a bit about that, where I talk about the divine blueprint that's held in the D12 pre-matter level, and that your Maharic shield, that level 2 of your Cathara grid, is connected to the divine blueprint and holds its mathematical program. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that. We're going to talk about the planetary biofeed interface system. This is the part of your Cathara grid where the planet's Cathara grid plugs into your Cathara grid. And once you open it, you can open fully the currents. Right now we're running on very, very little current circulating from we're running on not even half. We're running about a third of the natural life force currents that we should be running from the planetary grids just in density 1. We have dimension 1, 2, and 3 frequency that is sustaining our bodies and our consciousness here right now, and we're only running about a third of each of those dimensional frequencies. They are part of what's called the Kundalini energies. There are also higher levels of Kundalini, and there's something we're going to learn about tomorrow called the Antankarana, which is a 9-dimensional column of energy, of life force energies, which will take us into the Maharata and then the Kirashay and the Kundare, which is building a pillar of frequency between you and source, opening the conduits in your body so you can progressively build the ability to hold that pillar of living life force, of God consciousness, of very powerful healing frequencies and conscious awareness in your body. So we're going to learn about the system, where that all starts. Before you can begin running any of the higher currents, you need to open the natural connection between you and the planet. Right now it's only running on a third keel. We've got to get it opened all the way. The way to do that is to open the 12th chakra and various other things. Helps to know where your chakra is if you want to open it. So we'll learn where they are. Most of the techniques that we use will be telling you to direct this energy in this color into this place. Go to chakra here, now go to chakra here. So the chakra system, learning where the primary 15 chakras are, is going to be a significant and important part of Cathara healing. It's really like your location map. If you want to learn to run frequency, know where to put it so you can begin making healing changes in any level of Cathara. We will be using chakra induction. That means you put energy in a chakra, and because chakras are designed to take that signature into the deeper template, they're like little transport systems. If you put an energy signature, let's say a symbol, in your heart chakra and breathe it in, you're literally inducing that mathematical code into what's called the seal that's at the inside of that chakra, and that seal leads to the Cathara grid, which leads to your divine blueprint. So we're going to be using chakras a lot, so we'll talk about those. Morphogenetic expansion, this one's fun. Morphogenetic expansion, growth cycles, death, and molecular compaction. We're going to explore briefly, but clearly enough, why we die, what the underlying condition behind all disease is that we're experiencing in our physical bodies. The condition is called molecular compaction. We'll talk about what that is, why it occurs. We'll also look at, there's a chart in here, that has to do with the growth cycles, the natural growth cycles of what a human imprint was supposed to be like. At what ages was what supposed to happen? How did we become avatars here when things were working right? How did we wake up to that if we started out as a little fetus and grew in our mom's belly and then came out? Then what? Did we come out, being able to recite 20 different languages, and were we 12 feet tall when we came out? Obviously not. So there was a growth process, even when our DNA was working well, as far as different stages, how many years it would take to get all of those frequencies opened in the body, and to get the body to grow and expand enough to hold your consciousness as a D12 being. We're going to look at what those natural growth cycles were once upon a time, and look at what they are now compared to it. And it's pretty sad when you look at it, because we literally got stuck at the first stage of transition out of 4. So we're going to look at those a bit. In that, we also will probably touch briefly on the fetal integration process. how you get in the body in the first place. And we'll find out just a little tiny thing that the Catholic Church won't be happy at all about me telling you, that has to do with when conception occurs and when soul integration occurs with conception, because they don't happen at the same time. And I will argue with any pope from here until eternity to explain that there's a very important reason why that can't even happen. It won't happen, because if it was going to happen, it would create a miscarriage. So we're going to just briefly look at that a little bit. And then we're going to go into levels of human anatomy. This is where we find out where the big basic structures plug into our body. The embodied Cathara 12-tree grid. Where's our level 1 Cathara grid? The crystal seals, shields, signets, and Huva bodies, and auric capsules. These are part of the crystal seals grid, which is the level 2 grid. Where are these guys, and how do they interact with each other, and how do they interact with level 1 and the rest of ourselves? And dyadic points. Now, we'll touch on these so you know where the anatomy fits, but these are really going into what would be Cathara level 3 technologies. We'll touch a little on them tomorrow, because when we talk about Merkaba, we're beginning our investigation of the dyadic grid. But for now, we're going to focus on level 1 and 2 and learning how to use those two parts of the grid and finding out where this part of the grid, the dyadic points fit. We have seed seals, which are things that control in the body. They're like little crystallized points of frequency that control, and they're actually part of this grid here. They're part of the second level grid. They control the Merkaba fields, and they also control how much current can come through what part of the body and DNA template at what time. If the seals are like gates that open and close, and if you open them, you can get the current to come through. But normally, when you're keeping yourself in a three-dimensional focus, so you keep your body and your consciousness 3D and don't like go disappearing out of here because you accidentally opened a seal, these things naturally stay closed until you're going to consciously learn to open them. You have to know where they are and basically how to run current in order to open them. If we're going to be using, which we are, the triadic phase currents, which are the higher dimensional currents from D4 and up in density 1, which only goes up to D3, we have to open some major seals to allow the frequency to come through from the higher spaces, or we just won't get it in our template. We won't get a communication, an electrical communication going between strands 4 and higher and D1, the D1, 2, and 3 strands of DNA. Now, I talk about DNA, and I say we're on most of us are on third strand activation. And people go, I thought we only had 2 strands, a double helix. When I talk about strands, I'm talking about sets of double helices, heli, all right? One strand template creates one double helix, an electrical helix and a magnetic helix. They intertwine together and are held together by hydrogen bonds in the chemical DNA. Now, as we become more activated, we will always see a double helix, because it's not as if you have one strand and a double helix, then another one pops out and another one pops out, and you have all these strands where if you looked under, if you did the testing, you'd see this starburst. It is a starburst of crystalline structure that builds in the DNA, but it will always follow the template of the double helix as it's known right now. That will be the structure that even when we're 12-strand, we will just have 12 layers of that, which means the chemicals that manifest on the templates that create the 12-strand will simply add to it. Right now, the chemicals that are part of the DNA are part of strand 1, 2, and 3. And they're not all of any of those strands, because most of the strands are shut off, even the 1, 2, 3 strands. Most of them are operating on about a third capacity. So we're going to be learning about the DNA, how it works with all of these systems as a transducer of energy. A transduction sequence takes place where energy goes from the non-manifest states through into manifestation, and the DNA of biological life forms is a key element in this transduction sequence. It is literally the manifestation template through which the rest of our hologram jumps into life, our molecular body, and also the projected hologram that we walk around in. All right, we'll talk about axiom lines and the Hara level. The Hara level we won't cover too much here, because this gets into radial body anatomy, which is really from level 4 Cathara, they told me, but it's something they're giving us to tack on a little bit to the end of Cathara level 2 introduction. So we'll be learning a little bit about the Hara level and the axiom lines, but the most important thing we're going to learn is how these systems fit together. So you see the levels and layers of your subtle body anatomy, so you can understand where the primal life force currents are going. When they come in, where do they go? They go through this first, then this, then this, then this, then this, then this, and then they pop out here in the hologram. And then when they're coming backward, they go through this series. So once you understand what the parts are and how they fit together, it's really not too hard to understand what you're doing when you're running current. You know where the currents are coming from. You know there's ways to direct which currents you want to select, and you know where to put them. So we're going to go through that today. And we'll just touch on this, the 12 human senses, aparthy and human perception. That's a little section that was in there to show that it fits in with the pattern. But again, a lot of these, because Cathara level 1 is the introductory level, you can do a whole level of Cathara on the technologies involved with just one of those sections. So this is to show you what the sections are, the sections of anatomy, the pieces of anatomy, and how they relate to each other, where each one of these layers could have much more detail as the Cathara 12-level program manifests itself between now and I don't know when we're going to get to level 12. We're just getting the introduction to level 2 down. Part of the reason the Cathara manual and the Cathara program itself hasn't moved faster, as far as we would have had level 2 completely done and probably been starting the text for level 3, if we hadn't had to go into the Templar mechanics. The Templar mechanics are what we're going to be learning next weekend for the people who are coming to that workshop, which is the Planetary Service Crisis Intervention information. It teaches us about stargates, teaches us about the drama, what's happening, and what we can do to be a part of the healing of this planet. That wasn't really scheduled to come in until about 2006. That was supposed to start. But because of the political events that have taken place here, it is a crisis intervention effort to bring the Templar knowledge here faster, because it's not going to matter much if we can do Cathara healing, but we don't know how to work with the planetary grids if the planetary grids are going to roll right out from under us. And it's at a point where if work isn't done to work with the planetary systems, the planetary Templar, we are getting precariously close to fulfilling some very old prophecies that none of us would really like to see, which have to do with end times and all of that stuff. Well, ends are just new beginnings, but they can be very messy in the process. So the reason why we don't have more of the text available on Cathara is because we ended up with a 200 and some page manual and course for planetary grid work. And also, we ended up with the Voyagers Volume 2 Second Edition, which is a whole new update on the political mess that has taken place and where recent events have fit into that. So there are more levels to this program coming. They will be given, along with the other levels of the Templar program and the other things that they're giving us, as an as-needed basis, where whatever is the first priority of what we need to know most is going to be given first. So I can't promise you next year we'll have Cathara Level 3 done. It depends what is given next as far as what needs to be done with the planetary energies next, because we have to help the planet and ourselves at the same time. So anyway, we will go through these so you know the parts, where the parts fit. I want to show you one thing, just backtracking from the chapter before. Where's the transduction sequence, honey? I had mentioned something called the transduction sequence. And this is the easy version. Transduction, it means, it's one of their words, it means, this is page on the bottom, 35 on the bottom. Okay. The transduction sequence is the process by which the consciousness currents pass through the different phases we've talked about, from consciousness to particle units, to which are particle, particle, particum, into chelons, to Cathara scalar grids. Okay, these are the Cathara grids, levels 1, 2, and 3, which would be the 12-tree grid, the crystal seals grid, and the dyadic grid. Then these are considered particle grids, and it goes into more advanced developed chelon or particle grids. Morphogenetic fields, that's another word for chelon field, which are the crystallized, three-dimensional crystallized portions of the template. All of these things here are made of chelons. Here's where chelons fill out and become more sophisticated, and they run more combinations of current at different angles and different variations of flash line sequences. Okay, after we go from morphogenetic fields, we go into Merkaba fields. That is the stage. This is where Merkaba fits in to taking consciousness and bringing it down into manifestation. It's not the only part of the game. It fits in with a series of other things. You have Cathara grids first, and particle grids, which are the chelon grids that form morphogenetic fields. Then they form Merkaba fields, which is part of the dyadic grid, and then it grows out from the dyadic grid. And that goes into the DNA-RNA imprint, which is the template. And then it goes from there into the bioenergetic field and chakras, and then to something called the nadial capsule, we'll learn more about the nadial capsule, because nadial capsule is part of something called the radial body. There's not just the nadial capsule, there's a bunch of different capsules. We'll talk about those when we get into the new information tomorrow at the end of Cathara, Introduction to Cathara Level 2. Because this transduction sequence was just a basic way to show you how some of the parts fit together to bring those currents from non-manifest into manifest, because that goes from the nadial capsule into the DNA RNA, the manifest DNA RNA, and it goes into something called natus rivulets, which have to do with the nadial capsule, and they go into the nuclear core, and this is where in here you'd have like quarks and things that build up to subatomic particles, to atomic particles, into nuclei, and those kind of things. And then from there it goes up into, in a biological system, central nervous system, metabolic rates, biological rhythms, the blood-brain chemicals. This is where you manifest. So a transduction sequence is a process by which your consciousness progressively enters the primal structure and primal order of universe by becoming primal substance. It becomes primal substance, which are particae, particae, particum currents of consciousness that move through and take the form of those particae, particae, and particum. And you go through the series of transducing your energy and your consciousness into form. When we get to the end, I have a long night ahead of me, because they've been giving me the expanded transduction sequence. And I'm trying to get the graphs done for this, for you tomorrow. And some of the information, some of it had me lost. I'm going, oh my God, I need a physicist sitting next to me to ask him what the names of some of these things are. So I'm trying to put it in a way where you don't need to have a physicist sitting next to you. But it's explaining a lot more detail on this transduction sequence process. That's why I didn't spend much time on it. This was like part of chapter 1. It's just to give you the idea here, is there's a sequence of very set events. This is the primal order structure of how it works. Everything in manifestation, no matter what scientist wants to argue what theory, has to follow this process. There are natural laws that govern this universe, whether or not our scientists want to accept that fact. See, once you know that there's natural laws, it kind of implies you don't have a lot of leeway. You're either breaking them or you're not. Right now, science likes to play games. It likes to explore things that if it knew better, it knew it shouldn't do. But as long as, it's like, it's kind of like, as long as you don't know it, then you can always say, oh, well, we didn't know. We created a mess. Oh, I'm sorry. We blew that up. Oh, whoops. We did a horrible genetic mutation. Oh, my God, we created a new species of something. Yeah. And it's like, if they knew, or if they acknowledged that there were laws that govern these things, natural laws of energy, and they had access to what they were, they'd have to either say, I have no conscience and I'll do what I want anyway, or I'll have to rein in my free will a little bit to work within the natural laws of creation so I don't create any harm to anything. Science here isn't mature enough right now. Now, there's a lot of nice scientists out there that are. But when you take science as a body, what most people don't realize is, just like when you take religion as a body, you have a bunch of well-meaning people, many who have dedicated lifetime after lifetime to trying to be the best and do the best in whatever belief system they were fed. But what most of them do not realize is that since 25,500 BC, at the core of what used to be organizations that were supposed to assist and help humanity, what has actually done is the Illuminati groups have progressively taken control. So you have a few little Illuminati groups controlling hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes millions of people. It's happening in science and it's happening in religion. And they don't like each other, the two groups, because they each have a different agenda. But both of them use the exact same tactics. They use fear, intimidation, arrogance, putting you down in order to make themselves look important so you'll never question them or say, excuse me, I don't think that's right. They use information propaganda, and they use information hiding in order to keep you educated only to the level that they want you to be educated at. All of these things are part of the natural order, the natural laws. Once upon a time, we all did our best to live by, because we knew if we did, not only could we have everything we could possibly want to imagine to experience, there's no limits. God didn't say we had to be broke. God didn't invent laws of vows of poverty. Yeah. Now, who would benefit from a vow of poverty? Think about it. Do you think it's going to matter to God one way or the other? God doesn't need money. There were tricks put in, that there have been many poor priests and priestesses that shouldn't have been. But as long as you're poor, you're pretty disempowered, and it means somebody else can pull your strings. You're at somebody else's mercy to take care of you. Now, if you understand that you are a part of God and that God will always take care of you, you're not attached to money. This is what it used to mean. Vow of poverty, it wasn't a vow of poverty. It was a vow of non-attachment. It meant, be it person, place, or thing, there's nothing that I will hold on to more tightly than my direct relationship with Source. And if I get guidance that it's time for me to move from my country and leave my home and my family and even my children and all the things I love the most, if I have to do that, I will. Because I know that even though it might not make sense to me right now, that my Christos self and God know there's an even better way for me to be and to express my whole Christos self as an avatar. And I know the people I leave behind will be taken care of too. It was meant to teach you not to get attached to illusions, the illusions of manifestation. Because the reality is, nobody ever dies. They just think they do. The reality is nobody and nothing is ever lost, because nothing can get lost, because all it takes place within God. It was meant to not let your illusion get between you and your relationship to God, but it was twisted into a things like the vow of poverty, where to prove your loyalty to God, you're supposed to suffer. Now, what kind of God would want you to do that? I remember a long time ago, before I had the full memory banks open where I could make sense of it to myself, I remember thinking, and I'd read the Bible and things like that. If God was really like that, I would quit. I would just say, go find somebody else to manipulate. If you're so mean, maybe you should take a course in anger management. Because, if all you can come up with is wrath, and you're supposed to be what I look up to as my role model of what I'm going to try to become like, I aim higher, We all need to. When we learn about wrathful, mean gods who have a lot of ego issues, it's not God. These are groups of people who have created personifications of God in their own image and taught us to worship those. God doesn't want you to worship. He wants you to understand your worth and the worth of all things. Worthship. The process of acknowledging in great reverence and love. Worth. Value. The intrinsic blessedness of all life. Big difference between bowing down on your knees and begging to something you can't see. Hoping it sees you and hoping it's nice. All right. So anyway, all right. So we will get into tomorrow, and I'm still in the middle of the more detailed transduction sequence. See, when you get all of the transduction sequence down, and there's some real tricky turns of how things move here, and then they move there, and then they move back again. It's the manifestation process is what it is. Transduction is manifestation, how stuff goes from being non-manifest thought into manifest reality. So as we begin to understand how the primal life force currents come into our bodies and how our consciousness comes in, we will be stumbling across the secrets of the ages, the secrets of manifesting thought. And it's not just a lip service type thing. There is a science of thought manifestation. Before we can get a hold of our direct thought manifestation, we have to get our DNA templates cleared. Because as long as we have the twists and turns in the DNA that aren't supposed to be there, we'll try to create one thing and it'll come out as something else. It's like trying to bake a cake and you end up with a rooster. It's just like, how did that happen? Something got twisted in the oven. I don't know. That's what's happening with our manifestation process. We can have all the goodwill intention in the world, and we can even learn really good thought manifestation mechanics. We can be really careful with the words we choose and how we choose to use them, and have an absolutely perfect thought manifestation grid for item A, and use it in a DNA template that twists things and takes them on tangents that you don't know are there. And you're going to come out with item C when you were aiming for item A. And hopefully C has something to do with what you were trying to create. So when we learn the transduction sequence, I'm still struggling with parts of it, where I'm looking at it and going, oh my God, how many steps to this are there? And what does this mean? Okay, it does this, 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 and this. Now what does this mean? What should I do with my brain? All right, because once you realize it's the thought manifestation process, you realize, here's where my free will applies. Here's where my mental body applies. What we're going to discover tomorrow is really exciting, because there's a little thing that I've heard, and at first I didn't realize it was not a little thing. It was a big thing. In various spiritual traditions, in the New Age especially, you hear this stuff, oh, that's just lower mental body stuff. I'm above that. I'm in Christ consciousness. Now don't worry about your mental body. That's not important. Aim higher. There is a program that's running here to make sure we ignore our mental body, our mind, our conscious focus, our ego. Oh, bad ego, make it go away, hide it. We're spiritual now. Focus higher. The mental body is a part of the anatomy that's directly connected to the holographic field, which means that there is where our free will comes into play. And we've been being tricked, particularly through the New Age movement, to ignore that and aim for our spiritual parts. You can aim all you want for your spiritual parts, but if you don't anchor them through the mental body, you're not going to get them into your body. So we'll learn about these things too. And it's all connected to the transduction sequence. And we can continue from there. We'll go now. No, I think, did we do that? Yeah, I'll do that, okay. Yeah, I'm going to go through those pretty sequential. Yeah. Now, we're going to go through a couple pages of this, and then we're going to introduce the beginnings of the first technologies, the techniques that we're going to use. This information is Chapter 2, starts on page, was that 102 in the book? 102. Yeah. Wow, we're already up to 102. We're doing pretty good. The imprint for health. Healing occurs through correcting distortions within the Cathara grid and Huva body shields. That's simple enough. If we want to begin the true healing process, we go to the core of where the dysfunction is coming from, the causal element, which is the Cathara grid and the Huva body shields. Remember, Huva body shields are part of the level 2 Cathara grid, the crystal seals grid. You have the shields that hold the mathematical template that look like crystalline discs of energy, and then you have the circular energy formations, the eggs of energy that we walk around in, that come from the shields program. Next, the human body blueprint was designed to hold 12 dimensions of frequency, which means 12 flash line sequences, and 12 dimensions of consciousness. The content of 4 out of 5 Huva bodies within the 15-dimensional anatomy. Now, animal life forms have smaller DNA templates. They're connected to a Christos template, but they're species, most other species on this planet, didn't particularly incarnate to go through. They weren't appointed as guardians of this planet. They didn't come in as the guardians. They came in as the things that needed assistance with their evolution. They don't have 12-strand DNA templates yet, which means they have a longer evolution cycle to where they progressively build up that type of 12-strand DNA template. Humans were created with it from the beginning. We were created as avatars. Animal consciousness comes in to experience different types of reality, and then it has to accrete or build up its DNA template through reincarnation, through literally those templates that are simultaneously placed in different, life frames will move through one imprint and become a D1. That's when your first incarnation might be as a rock, where your consciousness is in D1, and it's the elements that would compose what on the outside looks like a rock. D2, you go up into the more complex elemental kingdom, where you actually have elemental consciousness. There's where you have the little fairies and little things that people have been telling stories about for years. The little things that nobody else sees, but that run around in the woods. Those kind of things. There are elemental consciousness. There are life forms that take on these forms. These are things with smaller DNA templates. If you don't have at least the coding for 3 strands in your DNA template, 3 dimensions, you will not be a 3-dimensional being. You will be 2-dimensional or 1-dimensional, which means like flat, if we look at it, right? Like some of the fairy folk actually are flat. They're like 2-dimensional drawings that hang in the air, but they're alive. They're like cartoons that come to life off the paper, that kind of thing. So there are life stations that you can experience life in these forms, and you would progressively evolve. If you started out as a rock, you would evolve through the elemental kingdom. Eventually, your crowning glory as a rock would become being a crystalline quartz structure, because they're one of the most evolved forms of mineral that there is on planet Earth. And you would go from there into the plant kingdom. And after a while of evolution through little types of plants with little templates into bigger ones, then you'd make the leap into the animal kingdom. And eventually through the animal kingdom, you would build up enough coding that you could make the link into a human-type form, a bipedal hominid form, that eventually you would be able to make the link into a human form. Now, humans were not created to do that type of evolution. They were created to be the guardians and overseers of those who were taking that kind of evolutionary journey. We have a 12-strand DNA template minimum. Now, indigo children, which is actually, they're called Orifeme. The indigo children, that word, that buzzword they use this day and age for this new wave of babies that are coming in. It's not just babies. They've been coming in for 100 years, and they've been a grail line here for millions of years. All right, it's called the Iani Grail Line. And they are Orifeme, Lyran Syrian Orifeme consciousness, the original founders race consciousness. They were the first forms created before humans were created. They were the founders races. We call them the founders races because the human imprint and the 12-strand DNA template came out of their larger DNA templates that had from 24 to 48-strand template capacity. So the indigo children now are actually the ancient ones coming back into form and bringing that potential back. Because if there's enough of the 12-strand, of the higher strand, 24 to 48 strand indigo children on the planet activating during the stellar activation cycle, we will generate so much frequency in the race morphogenetic field, or the race template, the tribal shield, that it will begin to clear and purge all the distortions out of the 12-stranders that most of the human population have the 12 strands. So they came in for a reason. They're on a rescue mission to reset the 12-strand pattern for the 12-strand people, and also to run the frequencies of the higher Hiroshe and Kundalini currents, primal light and sound currents, into the grids. But humans, every human, was originally, if you're a human soul, you were designed on a blueprint that holds 12 dimensions of frequency, 12 dimensions of consciousness, that's avatar consciousness. 4 out of the 5 Hoover bodies would be activated in circulating energy and breathing energy through your being. Now, we have a real interesting situation on our planet right now, because everything that's walking around in a human body, or what looks like a human body, isn't necessarily human. That's one of the things when your D4 perception starts to turn on and your 4th strand starts to activate, and you're walking down the street and all of a sudden you're seeing lizard faces flip through people and you're thinking you're losing your mind. Because, did I just see a lizard look at me from that person? No. You can think you're nuts for a while. That's when your 4th strand is kicking in and showing you what the person really looks like, what that soul is. Right now we have reptilian souls on the planet. We have Anunnaki souls on the planet, which are a whole different breed that are not human either. We have a whole bunch of souls on the planet masquerading as humans. Now, it's kind of funny because the ones that are humans on the planet, and the indigos, who also look like humans, none of us look like humans. What we're looking at, what we see now, the race as it is now, is so mutated, it hardly resembles what it used to look like. Human beings and indigos were beautiful. They were very tall. They were quite lean. They were breatharian, which means they didn't have the internal apparatus that we have right now. They came in various skin colors. All of the skin colors on the planet right now are representative of the primary races. You had, red skin, brown skin, black skin, white skin. They were all equal. It wasn't that whites were supreme and blacks were apes. I mean, some of the New Age stuff actually teaches that the black people came out of apes. It's like, talk about problems with these guys. No. Black people, there is a whole grail line, genetic grail line, of very, very high ascended masters that are in black skin form here. They're the same in red skin form, which would come through like Native American or Native North American type Indians. So there's a diversity that's still in the gene code. And the difference between, right now, we look at ourselves, and if we remembered who we were, we wouldn't even recognize ourselves now, because we had very little body hair. The human imprint had very little body hair. In fact, many of them were bald. The more evolved ones didn't have body hair. It was kind of inconvenient when you're going through stargates all the time. It just was not in the gene code. The original Orifeme indigos were very, very interesting, because they had much more of the characteristics of the founders, the original founders races of this time matrix. And there were 3 groups there. You had the original Elohai Elohim, which were the highest coded ones. They were called the blue flame people, or the emerald order people, the Elohai Elohim. They were the guardians of the blue flame primal light field, the D13 field, and the Akkadic records in the primal sound fields, the first expansion from source. They were leonine when they came down through their Christos template. Their main template was feline. They actually were like hominid felines. And it's really funny because you see people that have an issue with cats. Usually, it's a higher issue coming between who your avatar group is and its relationship to Elohai. Now, there's also been some twisted versions of Elohai that became what are called the Anu Elohim, which are a fallen angelic group. and they're one of the ones that created the Anunnaki races. Okay, so there is a whole bunch of coding we're carrying in our DNA, and right now most of us couldn't figure out if we were a human soul in a semi-human body, or if we were Anunnaki or Draconian or what, because the people who are lizards in human bodies don't know they're lizards, and the people who are Anunnaki don't know they're Anunnaki. And a lot of the people that are learning this stuff would be afraid to find that out, because, oh no, that means I have more problems, right? Does that mean I'm bad? No, it doesn't. At this point, we're in a situation on the planet where our DNA holds many, many mysteries, and it would be very scary to find out exactly how much we have inside of our DNA. I mean, what would you do if you found out that, after all, yes, you incarnated out of a draconian soul matrix, which means you're reptilian? Does that mean you're a bad person? I mean, that's right. No, that's right. Most of the people on the planet right now that are not human consciousness or indigo consciousness are out of two other groups. One is, and both of them happen to be fallen angelic groups. The people that are in human forms that came out of the fallen angelic groups were parts of those collectives that wanted to get their Christos imprint back, and they were trying to run away from the nasty fallen angelic groups that they had been a part of. So they incarnated out of those groups to get into human form on what's called a bioregenesis program to get their 12-strand imprint back. They're the ones who have been chased by the fallen angelic races because they were like members of their own that they controlled who escaped from the prison camp, and they came over to the other side. So right now, even though we will teach you through the Cathara program, and particularly through the Templar program, we will teach you about this genetic distinction that exists. We might all look like we have human faces on, but the reality of what's going on is we are not all human consciousness, and that's okay. Now, we have to be aware of what the draconian agendas are, and we teach that in the Templar course, what the Anunnaki agendas are, because they're taking agendas that are trying to wipe out the other species. And that's not fair play. And they've been playing this game for a long time. Now, if you happen to be a person who's an Anunnaki soul that's incarnate in a body, that doesn't mean you want to do that. That means you have free will choice now that you have a human body. That you can say, excuse me, I don't like that agenda. You know, I'm part of the Christos agenda. So there's lots of people that are coming from those matrices. But they're the people that are, there's a genetic coding that goes with the fallen angelic matrices that makes people who are Anunnaki souls or draconian souls more susceptible to being harmed by the fallen angelics, more susceptible to having their biofields possessed, more susceptible to getting implanted, and more susceptible to getting body snatched, which is full possession. So these are people that, and if you know, I mean, you never know if you're one until eventually you start to talk to your Christos self. It will let you know. It will not let you know what matrix you incarnated out of. It's not bad to find out. You're draconian. You know, if you're an indigo, if you're a human, if you're a draconian, if you're an Anunnaki. It's not. It doesn't matter what the answer is. It just matters in knowing, and you can find this answer in yourself, and it's worth taking some meditations and asking yourself and being ready for the answer. Don't be scared if it says, well, you happen to be draconian. What it means is, okay, that means there's something in my DNA template that I have to be extra careful to use my Maharic seal more often so the other ones can't get a hold of me. Because draconian races and Anunnaki races started out as blessed races just like any of the other founders' races. They ended up with a condition called code convolution. That's kind of like inbreeding genetically. If you take the same template and you combine it and combine it and combine it with itself over and over and over, at a certain point, the original integrity of the mathematical template breaks down and you start to get random probability and variations that weren't quite part of the original plan. That's how fallen angelic matrices came into being in the first place. So when we go into the healing issue within ourselves and within the general populations, we need to be aware that not everybody in a human body is a human. And if we make the mistake of doing that blanket unity, false unity stuff, where, oh, we'll just pretend we're all the same, that means we will never discover what our particular DNA needs. You will not discover if there are draconian codes that need to be flipped back to the Christos pattern so they can be cleared. What's happening in the New Age movement is a false unity movement. They're teaching people to see themselves as all one sea of fellow humanity, so you will totally never, ever find out about the diversification that exists. They're doing this so the ones that they have implanted in human bodies, who are dark oversouls running the other agendas, won't be identified. And they're doing it to take over the race genetic code. Now, unity comes from love of diversity. Unity through blessed diversity is what was the creation imprint for this time matrix. In your healing, you will find draconian people coming to you, and you'll start to know. You'll start to recognize it. Yep, that one's out of the Omicron matrix, or yep, that one's out of Odedicron, yep, that one's an Anunnaki, the Jehovian Anunnaki matrix, no, that one's a Tothian Anunnaki. You'll start to be able to feel the different families of consciousness just by being near the biofield of someone. If we approach this kind of knowledge with the usual nonsense that we're taught to look at things in the 3D world, we will cause damage to ourselves and to others, because we're taught to discriminate and point fingers and blame. What we need to do is approach them all with love, yet also be aware that if you have somebody coming to you to facilitate their healing, and they happen to have some real field problems because they have a DNA susceptibility, because say they're from a draconian matrix and the fallen angelic matrix wants them and wants their body, you may get yourself compromised as a person trying to heal that person, trying to help heal that person. And there's a lot of games played with this. But if you run your Maharic seal and don't forget to do it, you'll have enough frequency in your own biofield where that can't happen. So you can walk where angels fear to tread. You can go in and touch and heal and be a part of things that would terrify anybody that didn't know how to run their Christos consciousness and its frequencies. And you can know you can go in there and be safe and protected. So this is part of the reason why in the work that we teach, we will teach you about being able to recognize consciousness, being able to face the fact that just because people here wear human faces, that they are not always human souls, and human souls were created with one purpose, one template, divine blueprint, why they were created. Then there were the other ones from the fallen angelic matrices that were literally, some of them, created to destroy humans. They were created as a counter force. The Anunnaki, for example, were a race that was created by the fallen Anu Elohim, who used to be Elohai, and got code convolution and then tried to take over the time matrix. They created a biological race that was called the Anunnaki that has progressively tracked humans and indigos to destroy them, because they were the guardians of this time matrix that were in the way of the Anu Elohim matrix. There's been a lot of Anunnaki that have evolved, have looked at their creator gods and said, we don't want to do this anymore. We want to do what they're doing. We don't like you. We don't want to be bad anymore. We want to be good. So if we can realize some of the agendas that are going down, I don't usually talk about this in Cathara, because a lot of times people themselves are not ready. They're too immature. They go, oh, she's talking about, what do you mean people are all humans? Of course we're all humans. And they get all scared. You don't need to be scared. You just need to be aware. And we're not teaching you to be able to identify the different matrices and then point fingers and say they're bad or they're good. Now, some of them run Christos agendas and some of them run anti-Christos agendas. If you happen to be a person who incarnated out of a matrix who's running an anti-Christos agenda, you'll be the last to know, because they don't tell their own, they use them as puppets. All right? So if you're coming from a matrix like that, this is your chance for freedom. This is your chance to get your own free will back, because you have a human template. To be this far, you have enough of a human template where you can repair and regenerate the rest. Same with the people who might come to you for healing. You might do meditation for a while and really figure out what matrix you're from. Yeah, I'm human. Yeah, it feels like I'm human. Okay. I can hear a lot of people go, that's good. Because people are afraid to be draconian, or they're afraid to find out that they're, maybe an Anunnaki soul or something else in there. Don't be afraid of that, because you're blessed and beautiful even if you are. God created you too. You've just had some extra evolutionary lessons along the way. So you will be wonderful teachers when you get back up there. That's how we need to look at it. That's how we can love people that are even holding agendas that are against the Christos mission. If you happen to be a person who incarnated out of a matrix that has a bad agenda, bad in relation to the Christos mission, which is the mission that will allow this time matrix to continue and perpetuate under a freedom rather than a control. This is not meant to be a control matrix. If you happen to be out of a matrix like that, you have a history, a long history, of exploring some very, very hard subject matters involving polarity and densities. So you can be proud of yourself for getting as far as you have. And you can also realize that you have absolute power right now, right here, because you've got this far, to make absolutely Christed choices and to become a Christed being, regardless of what your matrix wants to do. But if you don't know that, if you don't know that you happen to be an Anunnaki or a Drac soul, you're not going to know they're pulling your strings. You're not going to know that when you try to talk to your oversoul or your soul, you're going to get Anunnaki Central broadcasting station. And I could give you a list of names of your local broadcasters, but I won't in this workshop. I won't do that in this workshop. But if yeah, what channel are you going to turn to? Who's your local broadcaster here? Yeah. You can name 5 of the main cable channel networks coming from what we call Phantom Matrix. Followed Angelic Matrix Central. Anyway. What is freeing to know is whatever matrix you're out of, you have the ability, if you have some problems, that you're a part of a collective, that let's say you really want to do a Christos thing. You're a good person, you know it, and you like being that way, and you're not going to tolerate any anti-Christos agenda messing with you. But then you find out, okay, you have a soul level, you have an oversoul level. What if your soul's a nice person too, but your oversoul level is the one that decided it wanted to stay with the twisted matrix, which would imply you had distortions in the strand templates that correspond to the oversoul level, 7, 8, and 9. If you know you have your Christos level, you can go over the head of your oversoul and back to your divine blueprint and say, well, that part of me that's up there doing its thing, that right now is choosing to be in conflict with the Christos mission, I'll respect its free will and let it do what it wants, but I want out of here. I don't want to do this, and I don't have to. You can literally run the D12 current down through you and anchor it here. And what it will do, all the way down, is begin to reset the divine blueprint. So you will help your oversoul to heal. See, just because it's higher doesn't mean it's better. Doesn't mean it has more power in those terms, because you can anchor that power here. So I wanted you to know about that. That's usually something I don't get that heavy in Cathara healing, because it's an introductory class. But you guys are on the ball enough. You're mature enough to not freak out and when you find out that somebody's teaching that not everybody in the human body is human. And there's enough of a love frequency. I can feel it in the room. There's a lot of love where you can look at something, and even if it's not behaving well, there seems to be, just in the consensual field here, which is your collective thought field, an understanding that if a child is bad, is it the child that's bad or the behavior? You learn to love the being regardless, which is called unconditional love, but you address the behavior. And what is the best way you can assist that being to choose better, to act in more life-giving ways? But you don't let the child, wreck the house and burn the house down, which we're trying not to let the fallen angelics do to this planet. But you have the ability to love them, which means you don't fall into the polarity dramas of love versus hate, of you're bad, I'm good. If you go, it's really sad. The Christian teachings were always, always based upon a very deep love for all beings. That is what the law of one is about, where you recognize all beings are part of the common source. Right now, if you go to most Christian churches, it almost makes me want to throw a Bible at them gently. Excuse me. It's like they teach you, Jesus taught to love everybody, to turn the other cheek, yet they will pass judgment, and they are taught to pass judgment on other people. Oh, you're evil. You're going to go to hell. Our group's not. The arrogance and the judgmentation, which are separating emotions, that teach you to give yourself the illusion that you're so much better than something else, you have a right to judge it. It's like, why don't you judge yourself for a while and have some fun, Unfortunately, what is being taught under the name of Christianity is not Christian. What it is a combination of things that came out of a bunch of Pharisees that were hired by the Church of Rome for the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, who got together with a bunch of other guys who had already taken over part of the doctrines of the church. They were the ones who were trying to kill and exterminate the Essenes, who were the ones who actually had the teachings. What we have got as our Bible has been a murdered rendition of what used to be true teachings. So if we can really just realize that what was in the Bible about people here, the words draconian and Anunnaki were part of the Bible. We were told about those races. There were whole history books on their involvement with us, on how they got intertwined genetically with our race here, and that's how we picked up some of our genetic distortions. They got intertwined because we were on a bioregenesis mission. They had agreed to enter what's called the Emerald Covenant, which is the Christos agreement of this time matrix. And they were coming here to get their DNA imprint back, to evolve through, to get the 12-strand imprint back. And we got intertwined with them, and then certain ones of them came in and literally tried to take over the biological form. And that we're still in the middle of that drama. It's good to know these things. if you're going to be a true healer, because then you won't get surprised when you start to go out into Cathara healing and you find yourself working on somebody and all of a sudden you get these really weird images of like mean things that look like dragons trying to rip your face off in the astral while you're running frequency. I was guided to go there with that because I wanted you to know about it, because it's really a surprise when you don't know about it and it introduces itself to you. You have a choice. Am I losing my mind? Because you start seeing things in people that you really don't want to see, and the first thing you tend to do is wonder if something's wrong with you. Like, oh my God, why am I seeing this? Couldn't be them. Is it good? But the thing is, if it is them, they probably don't know it either. So what we have here are sometimes you will find things in people's field. Sometimes you'll find things in your own field that you wish weren't there, that you need to go through processes to disengage. But if we can realize that right now there's a bunch of people on this planet, they're running what's called an Illuminati agenda. They are running an Antichristos agenda, and they are being used as puppets to do so. They don't realize that they're being used in that way. They don't realize that when something is in your field from the higher dimensions and it has a bad attitude, it can impulse your emotional body and make you feel things. It can impulse your mental body and give you thoughts that you think are your own. This is how bad it can be if you have a fallen angelic matrix messing with you. When you work with Cathara healing and bringing in the frequencies of the Maharic shield, which is the first thing we learn how to do, that's beginning to bring in the frequencies of the D12 divine blueprint, the pale silver liquid light. That is the frequency that no matter how bad the problem is, it wouldn't even, if you were in even deep possession, you would be able to, if you work with the techniques to where you can build a critical mass of that frequency, you will purge the things out that are not part of your divine blueprint. And everybody, even the fallen angelic races, started with an original divine blueprint before it got convoluted and twisted into things that became Antichristos. So, when we work with the Maharic shield, which we're going to do today, we are doing several things. We're reclaiming our heritage as far as our Christos identity. We're also at the same time creating a pillar of what looks like pale silver light that emanates into the biofield and around you and through you, the Maharic pillar, the Maharic seal. What it does is creates a frequency of D12, pale silver light, through your whole bioenergetic field. And as long as you keep that energized, you will have a barrier of protection that will allow anything that's good for you to move through back and forth. But anything that has a mathematical signature that is not part of your divine blueprint, that poses a danger to your divine blueprint, will literally bounce off. Doesn't mean you can't talk to it, but it'll be outside of the pillar. Now, people that have gotten involved with channeling, it's like channeling is one of the best ways to get possessed that you could ever imagine. You know? And we were seduced into that in the New Age movement. And so it was so smooth the way it was done. This was an Anunnaki trick. Okay? Fallen angelic Anunnaki races did this very, very well. They taught us how wonderful it was to finally have somebody out there through there talking to us that we didn't even ask who it was. We didn't care. At least somebody was talking to us. You know, at least there was somebody's out there. We're not alone down here. And then they tell us wonderful things like things about Christ consciousness that we really, really wanted to find out about because we had a resonance to that. And they could lead us like little babies, lead us through the channeling movement without telling us anything about the fact that what they were doing is biofield attachment and keeping us amused and distracted over here. Oh yes, here's how you manifest what you want here. Excuse me while I plug myself into your kundalini and sap your life force, this kind of thing. They didn't tell you about that part of it. You don't need to be a channel. There's a lot of channels that walk around, I'm a channel. It's like, impress me. Yeah. We're all channels, hate to tell you. Okay? Everybody here channels frequency and energy. The thing is, what they mean by I'm a channel means I'm talking to somebody important that's above and beyond this reality field. This is the attitude that tends to go with the channeling thing, where I'm talking to somebody more important, therefore I have more knowledge, so you need to listen to me. It's like a power play. Some of them are sweet about it. Others are really arrogant and obnoxious about it. What they don't realize is they're confessing their own level of lack of development. You don't need to have somebody else come and talk through your mouth when you know how to speak through your own. You don't need somebody to say, hi, I'm an angel, I'll tune every once in a while and fix things for you, when you're a Christos being and you know how to be your own angelic force, because you can access even more information than the angels have, because angels are D6 consciousness. You have a level of D6 consciousness. Archangels, they're into the oversoul realm. You have oversouls. These are still baby realms. These are the guys that people are listening to in the New Age movement. Hi, I'm Archangel so-and-so. You know, hi, I'm Angel so-and-so. Aren't I sweet and pretty? I'll talk to you nice, and I'll tell you all sorts of wonderful things you want to hear, so you'll follow me blindly and do what I ask you to do and not worry about taking responsibility for yourself. We have been seduced in this culture. There's two things happening, seduction and terror. When you deal with draconian matrix teachings, you usually get terror. They just teach you God's going to hate you and flatten your world if you don't follow A, B, C, and D, period, and you have to talk to the priest on a regular basis because he's your link to God. Traditional stuff is built on that. The seduction is even harder to spot because it's telling us everything we want to hear. Yes, we can be free. Yes, we can be Christos. Yes, we can talk to things that are higher than here. We even have parts of ourselves higher than here. Nothing like getting half ascension teachings given to you when you've had none. Half looks really good when you didn't have any to start with. We don't need either of those things as Christos beings, because we come to realize that any information that's up there and out there that any of those guys can access, we can access too, but in the most perfectly personal way. You might not get verbal translation. You might not have your Christos self level talk to you verbally. You may get it in direct cognition where you suddenly just know. What do I do with this? I don't know. Get out of your own way. Go do something relaxing. Look out at the snow and how pretty it is. And then tune back in and say, what do I feel about this? And if you're running your Maharic seal, you will begin to get an imprint from your D12 divine blueprint, which will override any distortions that are coming through from the emotional body that has connections to twisted grids in the planetary grid, so you can't always tell if what feels good is good for you. You will be able to establish these lines of communication. All right, now I'm going to go back on to the board, as they say. All right, fourth Huva body. Okay, the fourth Huva body. Now remember, the Huva bodies are the spheres of energy that are around us and around the planet and around the galaxy and around the universe. The fourth Huva body is called the Mahara Huva body. It's composed of frequencies and Partakai phasing flashline sequences of the 10th, 11th, and 12th dimensions. It manifests through the D10, 11, and 12 Cathara centers and the Maharic shield scalar grid of the fourth harmonic. So, when we're working with the Maharic shield and we're beginning to activate our Maharic shield in our anatomy, we are bringing in the frequencies of the fourth level, the fourth Huva body, the Mahara Huva body. That's our avatar body, if you want to look at it that way. The Maharic shield, that's part of the level 2 Cathara grid, it holds the original imprint for health. This is where, what is health? When your body's operating the way it's supposed to? Our race is so far away from health right now, it's frightening because of so many of the DNA distortions. However, if we use the Maharic seal, that is the beginning, the Maharic shield, activating the Maharic shield, which pulls up your Maharic seal pillar, that's the beginning of running the mathematics, the original mathematical program of health, which means your 12 DNA strand, 144 fire letter sequence, which we'll talk about later, mathematical program that your body is supposed to run on, where you have 144 chromosomes, where you're much taller. You're not going to get tall overnight. It's going to take a while to get that whole mathematical program back into the body. Good thing too, because your matter particles won't know what to do. They're having this frequency hit them that they haven't felt in over 200,000 years that they've been in density 1. Now 200,000 years is relative when you're out of time, but when you're in time, it's a very long flashline sequence. We have to build up the ability to hold it. One of the other false things that's happening in the New Age movement, the false ascension movement, is you literally have people saying, oh, come to workshop, blap, we'll blast you. There you go, the Melchizedeks are doing this. The Templar Melchizedeks. They're giving them initiations, and they're telling you, you're 12-strand activated now. Bye-bye, go home, you're fine. What you are is implanted right now, usually, and not with stuff that's going to activate your strands. They're also teaching that there are 12 single heli strands, little twist of technicals. They're teaching in many of the ascension teachings out there that each heli is a separate strand. So what they're calling a 12-strand is what we call a 6-strand. So there's a lot of tricks going on out there. What we're teaching you here is how all of the 12 coding actually works. You have 12 double helix strands. You have a Maharic shield and a Maharahuva body that holds the mathematical coding of the original DNA template. And this is what we're going to use to begin to reset the imprint for health. We're going to reset the imprint for health, which is the divine blueprint. And we're going to progressively work with that. There are many layers of the auric field and the chakras and things that we need to work with later. But you can work on your chakras all you want. You can work on your axiotonals and your meridians, and you can even work on your shields all you want. But if you don't take it back into the Cathara grid, the first level, where the distortions are being held, they will always override whatever healing you do on the surface. It's like having a sore underneath the skin that has something that needs to be removed from it, a sliver that's festering. And you can put as many Band-Aids on it as you want. And the skin might even heal temporarily over it, but the infection's still building in there because what's in there that needs to be fixed is still not removed. So we are going to go to the core, the Cathara grid level 1 template. That's what we clear when we begin the process of running the Maharic shield. It also has the fringe benefit of giving you temporary protection from anything messing with your fields. It will also help you to pop any implants you might have picked up along the way that you didn't know you had and don't really want to know you have. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. There we go. Okay, the Maharic shield can be used to repattern the Cathara grid holographic template back to its original imprint for health. So when we activate the frequencies of the Maharic shield that actually pops up as an energy field below the feet, we have the ability to then run D12 current, little subharmonics of it, at first, they're little bursts, nanosecond bursts of D12 frequency subharmonics come through. That's what it means to begin activating your DNA. But when you activate your Maharic shield, you're activating the 12th subharmonic in the DNA template for the first time in, since ancient times where we're able to do this. It will restore in the Cathara grid, the Cathara level 1 grid. The way to recode those Cathara centers is to activate the Maharic shield because that has the imprint for all of those 12 centers in it. To recode anything to the D12 frequency, you have to first open D12 frequency into the body where you can anchor it and bring it down in. And that's what we're learning to do with these processes. The flashline sequences of dimension 12 can override and correct faulty flashline sequences that manifest as distortions within the Cathara grid and the Huva body shields. So if we remember, everything are flashline sequences. We can look at DNA template distortions and distortions within our 15-dimensional anatomy, or at least the 11 and below dimensional parts of it, as distortions in the flashlines, where the rhythms are supposed to be a certain way, but they're off rhythm. They're not, in synchronization with the original flash rhythms of D12 and the divine blueprint, which throws off everything, our time orientation, our consciousness orientation. It gets us stuck in space-time. So the distortions, they have several levels to them. At their core, the distortions that cause the DNA twist that we have right now are distortions in the flashline sequences. There is a natural way that each dimension is supposed to have its own flashline sequence. Each DNA strand, each level of our body, of our subtle body anatomy, we have a level that corresponds to D1, dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3, dimension 4. The parts of our body that correspond to a dimension are supposed to carry the natural mathematical signature of that dimension. That's supposed to be in the core template. And from there, our diversification comes out, our individuation. We build on by using that flashline sequence and combining more different rhythms within it. But if that core rhythm is distorted, it literally knocks us out of alignment with the natural rhythm of the time matrix, which creates mutations within the physicality. That's what we're dealing with. They also manifest as keyline clusters of crystalline forms of energy that don't belong in the subtle body anatomy. And those things, in turn, manifest as chemicals in the DNA that don't belong there, which creates hormonal deviation within the body. We actually poison ourselves before we hit 100 years old, the way the DNA is working right now. The body kills itself. We're all suicidal and don't even know it. When we begin to work with repatterning from the Maharic shield, bringing it up through the core templates, we are starting at the deepest level to move the healing up through each of those levels, where it'll start to restore first the flashline sequences back to their natural rhythm. Dimension 1 flashline distortions will be put back to the natural Dimension 1 flashline sequence. Dimension 2 back to its natural one. The current that has the ability to fix all of them is the D12 current. Because within the D12 current, remember we talked about how D2 actually has the D1 flash line and the D2 flash line. D3 has D1 and D2 in it. Well, D12 has the natural mathematical pattern for all of the ones below it. So no matter how distorted they might get, if you run D12 back through, you're resetting the original pattern. And that's what we're doing with Maharic recoding. It's called Maharic recoding because we're recoding or repatterning the Maharic level, the D12 imprint, which is the Christos, divine blueprint, back in to our bodies or the planet. Because when we work with the Templar courses, the workshop that's on the Templar, we are doing the same types of things for the planet. Because the planet is in crisis, just like our bodies have been in crisis. And crisis on a planet in a Stargate cycle can result in pole shift. So we're working on things to help prevent that by clearing the grids, but we have to start with clearing our own body grids. And that's what Cathara healing is about. Okay, now, to begin the process of activating the Maharic shield, it takes us into the world of symbol codes. I talked about before how symbol codes are actually an image that we see in light. If we see it out here or in here, it's actually made of light. So it is a light symbol that has a very specific mathematical coding. That's what gives it its shape. When we know what symbols to use to direct frequency, we begin to have the power to directly interface with the mathematical programs the way they're supposed to run. So if you have a mathematical program in your body that's not working how it should be in divine right order, you will be able to, if you know what the symbol is that holds the real mathematical program that's supposed to be there, use that symbol and put it back in. The symbols are also the keys to opening seals in the body, because the symbols will allow, if you put a symbol into a certain chakra and then you run frequency through it, you're activating that mathematical code at the moment in that particular area of the body. If you want to open certain seals, if you want to activate your D12 current in your body, you need to use the D12 symbol code, the image, the symbol mathematical program, and you need to put it someplace and run it in a certain way. And we use the breath as well. Breath is a very important part of learning to run energy. So if you want to take a mathematical symbol, you say hold it in your mind, and then you want to move that so it can, let's say, be put into chakra 12. How are you going to get it from your brain into chakra 12, which is below your feet? You're going to inhale and gain some momentum, and then push it down. The inhale and the exhale breath, our breath is intimately connected with Merkaba spin, which is connected to Partakai phasing rhythms and how fast flash lines will flash, the rhythms of flash lines. When we start to direct our breathing in specific ways, it's like the natural flash lines for one dimension. There is so much room for variation on that line. That's why we have variation for individuality. That's why everybody has a little bit different breathing rhythm and heart rhythm and all of those things. We can learn to work with our breathing rhythms to either speed up within the range that's natural, the flash line sequences in that area of the body, or slow them down, depending on what we're trying to do. We can use the breath. It's the push-pull mechanism. It's what puts energy behind what you're trying to energize. There are all sorts of different ways of directing it. When we do transmissions, there are ways to transmit directly through the chakras, where you can go into a room, inhale, you go into a room, just go, nobody else knows you're doing it, but you project a field, a frequency. I hurt myself. I lost myself. Over there somewhere. No. So the breath is going to be a vital part in it. Now, it's not one of those things where you have to drive yourself crazy trying to go get your biofeedback machine to find out what is my breathing doing. I don't know. It happens so often I don't pay attention, because most of us, what is your breathing rhythm? I haven't a clue. You have to stop and think and then listen. But when you stop and think and get quiet to try to listen, you tend to hold your breath, so you can't hear your breathing rhythm. Wait a minute. What I usually tell people is when we're going to go into any type of exercise, whatever it is, just try to pay attention for a minute of what you're breathing at. Because as soon as you try to pay attention, it changes. Just the fact that you're going to try to pay attention. Just try to tell yourself right now, you're going to slow your breathing rhythm in half. And leave it at that for now, because it will start to bring you down into what's the alpha brainwave pattern, which means you can access your body currents better, your lower frequency currents. You need to bring the higher frequency currents up through the lower frequency currents, and you can direct it through the frequencies through the body consciousness a bit better when you slow down. When you slow your breath down just a bit, not to the point where you're going So I'm not going to tell you, hold it for 14 seconds between. It also helps if you put a pause between inhale and exhale. If you put a pause at the bottom and the top of each breath, it gives the oxygen exchange time to happen. It gives the body more time to let the energy move between all the levels of the template. Right now, we breathe so fast and so shallow compared to what we once did. It's amazing we can still stay functional because we're getting hardly any amount of life force in. We're breathing life force in and out when we breathe air. But air itself is not the only part of the life force. When we breathe in and out, we are controlling the flow of primal life force current through our DNA template, through our Merkaba fields. So when we begin to get conscious control, just a little bit, realizing that we have a breath that we can direct here that will directly give us an ability to interface with how fast and how smooth life force currents are moving through our body, breathing becomes a whole lot more fun. Oh, there's something I can do with this. This is why some of the Eastern philosophies would teach people years and years and years of learning how to get breath control. And bless those people, because they got the hard way. Like things that we teach now would take them like 500 years to get to the point where they teach this, because they'd like take the first thing, like Om. And you could do Om for 20 years before your master would tell you the next syllable. And you figure out about how many eons would it take you to become a master if you're going to do one syllable a lifetime. Okay, so, but they did know, the Eastern philosophies and Hindu philosophies, who also know about chakras, have known about, it was called prana in a lot of the different ones. The Eastern philosophies would refer to it as prana. But what they're referring to are the primal life force currents that are carried with the molecules in the air that we breathe. It's not as if oxygen is separate from it, but oxygen isn't the whole story. Oxygen is only the outer manifestation and the illusion that is one of the helpful carriers of the life force currents. Tomorrow we'll get into specifically what those life force currents are and how they come into the body and how we can use Merkaba to amplify them. Once we know how to run what is called a Christos Merkaba, there's a big difference between a general Merkaba and how many people are teaching it these days out there in the New Age movement, and a Christos Merkaba. A Christos Merkaba is a harmonic Merkaba. It's built of sets of 3 dimensions, not just singular dimensional aspects that are being worked with, and it runs the D12 current, which means it gets it on its right spin. Okay, we'll learn about what's being done with Merkaba out there right now, because you'd be amazed how we're being hijacked right now and taught how to amplify our own genetic distortions to serve somebody else's agenda. All right? Christos Merkaba is different than what is being taught out there as partial Merkaba training. Partial Merkaba will not tell you about the D12 frequency. It will not tell you how to activate your Maharic shield. It won't tell you that your Merkaba is connected to your shields and to your Huva bodies. It won't tell you the whole anatomy, because you might figure it out if you knew. Right? So we'll get into Merkaba tomorrow. But today we're going to deal with something called the Hierophant symbol. The Hierophant symbol, the core of it, is the D12 symbol code. And it's a symbol we've all seen a lot of places all over the place. The thing is, you don't have to be Jewish to use it. What they call, and you don't have to get into the Star of David stuff. It belonged to somebody else long before David adopted it. All right? It's a 6-pointed star. Now, flat 6-pointed star is where we start the activation process, which means if you take a 6-pointed star, technically that's a symbol for a Merkaba vehicle, which is a star tetrahedron shaped 3-dimensional thing, which is a different coding than a simple drawing, which I'll show you in a minute, of a 6-pointed star. The 6-pointed star flat drawing is the beginning of sending the mathematical instructions to your Maharic shield to tell it to begin transmitting the D12 subharmonics. You don't want to transmit D12 frequency pure before you get the rest of your body and systems able to handle subharmonics, because you blow yourself up and you can't do it. Your own Christos level won't let you do it. You can only pull so much frequency at any time that is not going to cause any harm to you. And your other levels of self will regulate that. You, in your Christos state, knows how much you can pull, and it will shut off the current when your body has enough at any given moment. So you can't hurt yourself with these techniques. You can't OD on Christos frequency. You can get a little buzzy sometimes. I mean, it's really funny. One of the things, people notice, and you probably have, that we smoke cigarettes. It's always smoke, and it's not a thing we endorse, but there's a reason. Because at times, there's the frequencies get so high in our fields that I know for you have different experiences with it that are a little different than mine, but it's in the same vein. It becomes difficult to keep focused here, where things start to disappear. Like people's faces all turn into an energy field, and you can't see individuals anymore. You just see lights. When you use things like certain chemicals like nicotine, it brings you down. It shuts down some of the DNA, so it gets you into body faster. I don't endorse using these kinds of things, but I want you to understand that when you start running frequency, there are some very strange effects that you may get at first. They're effects that belong to you. They're the part of what your consciousness is going to experience as it expands. But you may find yourself getting really buzzy, where you feel like a little bee buzzing around. You can almost hear yourself buzz, like an electrical hum that runs in your fields. You may find that a few too many times you notice street lights going out when you walk under them or drive by them in a car. Just a few so many times that it becomes strange. Why do street lights go out when I drive by them in my car? Because you're blowing electrical extra stuff in your fields, because you have a lot of buzzy energy in your fields. Most of the time with that is you're triggering the light sensors in them. They're picking it up, and the sensors are picking up the frequencies in your field, the subtle frequencies. You might start blowing computers or magnetic strips on hotel door cards or credit cards. If you work with the Maharic Shield technologies and run your Maharic Shield frequencies on a daily or at least every 2-day basis, you will be able to get rid of that extra static buildup, because it's static buildup that's causing that. It means your DNA templates brought this stuff in, but the rest of your system can't process it yet. So it's hanging out in your auric field, buzzing all over the place. It might also make people very nervous, like babies might cry when you go near them, animals might run. I mean, things like that. I don't know why. It's like, what'd I do? When you work with the Maharic Shield technologies, it will get rid of some of this. Now, if you go into activating major levels of high frequency codes that have to do with the planetary grids, which we begin doing in the round tables and the Templar work, that's like streetlights still do their thing when we drive under them. Even though we clear out the system and try to like send down into the earth whatever energy's extra that we don't need in our fields. So you'll still have some of the effects, but you won't hurt yourself running D12 frequency. You can't put so much in that's going to cause you damage, because literally the chakras and the shields will close and stop the flow of energy so it doesn't blow up its own system. It's self-regulating, because it's not just an it. It's a part of you that's very conscious, aware, and intelligent up in the D12 frequency level that says, okay, that's enough. You don't want, like, do you ever see goldfish that if you keep feeding them, bless them, they'll still eat and eat and eat until they pop their stomachs and kill themselves? Your Christos avatar level won't let you do this to yourself with energy. All right. Now, the higher... I've never used that. I've never thought of that before, actually.
I'm glad.
Yeah, some really weird ones are coming out today. It must be the consciousness field. You guys hold such a high vibe, it's like kicking in some other higher level of humor that even I'm trying to get used to. Okay. The Hierophant symbol code is a scalar standing wave pattern containing the electrotonal programs of the 11th and 12th dimensions combined. The Hierophant symbol code serves as a frequency waveguide through which the Maharic Shield can be activated to run 11th and 12th dimensional frequency through the Cathara grid for repatterning the imprint for health within the core holographic template of the body. Okay, the Maharic Shield can be activated with the Hierophant symbol. Now, if you notice, we're not just dealing with D12 frequency, we're dealing with the 11th and 12th dimensional frequency too. When you use D11 and D12 together, it creates the full Christos ray, because it's pulling in the whole spectrum from the antiparticle universe as well. So you're not just running D12 current here, which would give you a pure white current. You are running the 12 frequency bands here and the 12, actually 11 and a half of the 12 from the other side, because you blow everything out of manifestation if you put the 12 and 12 together. So it comes out as a pale silver current. And that is the full D12 Maharatic ray, they call it, or the platinum ray. Some people in the New Age movement have coined that phrase, the platinum ray. They're referring to the same thing, but they're teaching you to use it in sub-increments so you can twist it in ways that weren't meant to be twisted. What we're doing is we're going to teach you how to run the D12 Christos ray, which is 11th and 12th dimensional frequencies combined, which means it is frequency that's going to run through you and your antiparticle double. Your double self in the parallel universe will also, by you working with these healing energies, it will begin to assist and heal the templates of yourself in the double world, which will help. Because right now we're being affected by what's happening in the parallel system, but we don't know it because most of us don't know the parallel system even exists. There's also another place called the inner earth system. We talk about that in the Templar thing a bit more. But as we work with the D12 and D11 frequency combined together, we are making a link between what's called parallel earth, this earth, and inner earth, which are three separate but interconnected reality fields, each of which we have a part of ourself stationed within. So it is a very powerful current. It's much more powerful than trying to run D12 as a white frequency. You know how everybody likes to run white light? They're running still a polarized D12 current. It's polarized because it's only the particum universe current, which is the base magnetic, which is over here where we are, where we're stationed. They're not running the electricals, the other half of it, that is part of the particle universe. So when we run D11 and D12, we're combining particle and antiparticle currents, which is the strongest pure Christos imprint, because you're actually carrying the imprint of the divine imprint of both sides, of both polarities into one. So it is stronger than the pure white light. And a lot of people like to, pure white light's the highest, or gold light. Gold light happens to be D8. Aim higher. Pale white is like, white is nice, it's a pearly white, it's very pretty, it's D12, but it's D12 polarized. What you want is D12 non-polarized, which is D12 plus D11.5, where you say D11 from the other side, combines it into a full Christos ray. So that's the frequency we're running. It is a waveguide, which means it's going to guide the frequencies of consciousness into the body through the Maharic Shield template. So it's literally serving as a mathematical instruction, like a computer program, to teach that current of how it's supposed to move into the body. It's the Hierophant symbol is the original D12 symbol code. If you were going to take and give a visual symbol mathematical representation to the D12 flashline sequences and what they are and what all that coding is, the Hierophant symbol, which is the 6-pointed Star of David, is the original symbol code for that. That is the first symbol code. Each of the dimensions have their own symbol code. And eventually we'll learn how to use each one of them. But we're learning to use the higher ones right now. The symbol codes that directly go with the natural divine blueprint flashline sequences of the higher frequency currents. Because they're the ones that have the power to come in and clear any distortions out of the ones below them. So we start with the D12. When I say D12, I'm referring to this, just so you know. The D12 that is parallel and here. It's the particle antiparticle, a full current. All right, using the Hierophant symbol code, the planetary biofeed interface system can be activated to empower the Cathara grid repatterning process by drawing frequency from the planetary Maharic shield. Now what we're going to do is when we activate our Maharic shield, we're going to activate the planetary biofeed interface system. It's the point in our bodies and in the planetary grids where our personal Cathara grid connects directly to the Cathara grid of the planet. So the energies, where are we going to pull energy from? We're going to pull the Maharatic frequency, the D12 frequency, now that it's finally available in the Earth grids. We're going to pull it from the Earth grids into our bodies, and we're going to circulate energy back through. It was always like a love affair between person and planet, because there was a constant inflow of energy, a sharing of energy, a circulation system. Most of our circulation system has been shut off. That's why we've turned into a culture that can actually abuse the Earth as badly as we have right now. In the ancient days, it would be like beating up your mother. I mean, you just never ever do it. You would never make a decision that would hurt a tree or contaminate a lake or do something terrible to the planet. Because the planet was a living being that you knew, and you knew you were a part of it. People didn't feel separate from the natural kingdoms in the ancient days like they do now. The reason they feel separate is because DNA strand 2 that connects to the telluric elemental kingdoms has been primarily shut down. So we can't feel them anymore. We can't feel that connection very strongly. Some of us can, because it depends on how much distortion is in strand 2 template. So we're learning at this point to reconnect not only to the higher parts in the higher dimensional fields, but to reclaim our connection to our mother, our Earth Mother,